What we found in our conversations with school leaders, teachers, teacher leaders, mentors, is that there tend to be very well-established systems for compliance and required expectations. So for example, grades or attendance. But when it comes to teacher retention at a systems level, it's not part of the standard practice to design certain systems and implement and sustain them in a way that is meant to intentionally address retention needs to build more belonging environments day by day.
Welcome to part 2 of the 3 key elements of teacher retention. In our last video, Brian talked about 3 shifts that leaders should make when it comes to thinking about teacher retention, as well as a brief overview of what the 3 key elements of teacher retention are: knowing teachers genuinely, engaging teachers meaningfully, and celebrating your teachers authentically. If you want more background information on those topics, click the link in the video description to watch that video first, and subscribe to our channel to get notified when we upload the final video next week, where we dive deeper into what each element represents and how to implement it in your school or district.
So I want to name here that, teacher retention at schools, it's different from school to school. We can't just paint all the schools with the same brush and say this is what's causing teacher attrition right now. But what we do know is that teachers need to feel like they belong to a school community. And this is true for, not just schools, but for all businesses and organizations. To increase belonging, teachers should feel agency. They should be empowered and have some autonomy, and they should be included in decision-making. We know that teachers need to be developed. They need to get feedback. They need to be recognized for opportunities and growth. Our teachers need to feel a sense of equity, that work environments are equitable, they're inclusive and representative of them and the students that they serve, and that organizations prioritize wellness, the social, emotional, and physical well-being of their teachers. The elements of belonging are what really tell someone that, this is where I am and this is where I want to stay for the long term.
So when we talk about an enabling system, we really just mean a protocol, a series of protocols or actions that are executed in some sort of sequence in response to something or to maintain something. So for example, parent outreach. That's probably something that as an educator, whether you've been a teacher, you are a teacher, or you support them, or you work in a school, that's probably a regular part of your day or a regular part of your week. Some schools have very clear systems for doing that, and others can be very reactive, right? So an enabling system is one that is proactive. So for example, if the AP and a group of teacher leaders sit down weekly, they're looking through attendance, right? The family has already gotten a call from whoever runs attendance in the school saying, hey, is Jenna okay? Is Brian okay? What's going on? Can we send, homework? What's going on? How can we be helpful? So there's that, right? That is part of the system as well. But this example here is really checking in more deeply. And so the AP and teachers looking across trends, have there been chronic absences? Are we talking about that student? Right? Looking at other data and kind of triangulating what might be going on, but doing this in a disciplined fashion week over week, right? And then prioritizing who are the 10 or a dozen parents or so that we might have to call across our grade levels, and calling those parents and checking in with them. And if they don't answer, calling back, right? Until you do. But doing that with, again, intentionally and proactively, and knowing that there's a regular expectation for the AP in this case and the teacher leaders to review student attendance, right? Triangulate that with different data, and then prioritize who's going to call who and about what. Many school leaders also, looking at the next example, have a staff newsletter or maybe a weekly email or something that you send out. Not all principals, not all APs, right? Or department chairs or department leads, but many. And so we think about this as a normal thing. We share, okay, as a principal, here's what's going on this week. We're going to have these visitors. I want to recognize Jenna and Brian for these things that they accomplished last week, etc. By the way, we're making progress on this initiative. It seems obvious enough, but probably many of you could tell me if you're supporting schools and principals how this might not feel like a priority, right? And having a system around that where I asked Brian to send me, if I'm the principal, a couple bullet points about the English department, and Jenna the same thing about what's going on in the math department, right? And just checking in with different people and having them contribute to that newsletter so that teachers feel informed. People understand it and can expect what's going to happen in the school. And I feel like there's some transparency and communication as a member of the staff. That helps me understand how to plug in, right? And how to be a member of the school community. Again, so these examples might feel obvious, right? And they might feel like things that all of you do, but not all school leaders and schools function this way for parent outreach and communication. And then when we think about the context of teacher retention, less schools and school leaders think about enabling systems as a way to drive retention. And so we position these enabling systems, yes, as a way to build belonging, as Brian talked us through earlier, and to build belonging steadily and over time. And so we're going to get into exactly what we mean by these enabling systems and what examples of them look like. One thing to help you understand a little bit more which enabling system might make sense for your school, if you're a leader or you support leaders or teacher leaders who support teachers, is a diagnostic tool that we've created. And so this diagnostic tool, you'll see that there's 3 different colors. So they align to each of the key 3 that Brian explained to us. This is just meant to be an informal kind of pulse check for your own practice, or if you support principals or APs or those who support teachers, this can be a tool that you use with them in collaboration with them to do a guided reflection. And the basic idea is, as you'd expect, just checking in on each of the key 3. Shouldn't really take any longer than maybe 10 minutes. And thinking about, am I doing these things? Where is the maturity of my practice, and how confident do I feel, and how consistently do I do some of these things? And so we're gonna Brian, if you can click into the larger example. We're not going to spend too much time on this. And again, we are going to share this out with you. So when we're looking at this example here, and we'll just get into one, for example, right? Knowing teachers genuinely. As Brian talked about earlier, being intentional about setting up sacred time with teachers, that might not mean all of your teachers, right? If you're a high school principal, meeting with 110 teachers every month, that's pretty much all that you would do, right? So we recognize that that's not realistic. However, if you're segmenting your group of teachers and you know, like, okay, these are the ones that I really need that really need attention. I've noticed that like these 2 have really been struggling. These 3 are brand new, right? And these 5 are the lifeblood of the school. They carry the culture of our school at the classroom level. I need to prioritize meeting with that group of teachers every single month, right? Are you doing that? And then the next question is, what does that look like? So we're actually going to share a one-on-one meeting protocol with you shortly. So on and so forth. The idea is that, like, really over time, all of these different practices are in place, right? Each of these aligns to, again, the key 3 that Brian walked us through. And so you see that there's a range of different practices here and systems that enable them. And some of these are seasonal, right? So for example, like a clearly defined intent to return process, if you're working in a district, the district might have that in place for you, right? So you might go a little bit deeper to have stay interviews with people to complement that, right? Or if something's going on in the school, right? Or you want to get out ahead of a change that is coming, are you having empathy interviews with people? And then what is the protocol for doing that to understand how they experience a particular part of their day, right? So again, use this as a reflection tool. It's meant to be informal and to really spark conversation with yourself and reflection with yourself if you're doing this alone or doing this in collaboration with others. And the idea really would be to choose 1 or 2. The idea is not out of the gate to do all of these things. It's really to narrow down your focus, right? And so it continues on with different enabling systems aligned to how you might engage teachers meaningfully. And then finally, on the last page, different enabling systems about how you can celebrate and recognize teachers. Like we mentioned, and I mentioned in the last slide about enabling systems, almost all school leaders, right, in schools have very clear systems written out in place around attendance. What do we do if a child is absent X amount of times? When it comes to retention, right, there are some things that are in place that can be aligned to retention, but being honest with ourselves and asking, do we really have clear systems and ways that we think about how we're driving retention and doing these things with discipline over time repeatedly, right? That is what this tool is designed to help you begin to think about and identify which systems might be best for your context and for your community.